Hi, I'm Andrew at PRX, and today we're going to install a 90-inch profile rack with Kipping bar. Okay, first I'm going to take you through some of the parts that should be included with your profile rack. To begin with, we have our wall brackets. There should be 2 of those. The holes in these brackets will line up with your studs in the wall, whether you have 16-inch spaced on center or 24-inch on center studs. Here we have a linkage arm assembly. Should have 4 of those. Here you'll see the difference between our profile racks and our Profile Pro racks. Just a slight difference there. And we'll get more into that later. You should have 2 such J-cups and 2 uprights. The uprights are made of 2x3 American steel, and you see that this is our Pro model. It's very similar, but heavier tubing, a little bit bigger holes, and we laser etch these numbers in to the uprights all the way up. Over here we have our Kipping bar. Something that's not always readily apparent on the website is that this Kipping bar is actually 2 bars. It sits like this at the top of the rack, and there's a lower bar that sits in between those 2 uprights, and then this stands at the top of the 2 uprights, gives you a little extra clearance away from the wall. Over here we have our hardware and fasteners. You should have 20 flat washers like this, 2 different types of bolts. These are just a 1/2 inch longer. So 2 longer ones, 4 of the shorter bolts, 4 of these very short bolts, or 1 3/4, 10 locking nuts, and we call these nye liners. It's a plastic bushing, 8 leg screws and flat washers for those, a couple of safety pins with bridge pins, and we'll move on to the tools we're going to use today. These are tools that you don't necessarily have to have. I like to use a square just to have one handy, a plumb line just to make sure that I'm lining up with the studs all the way down. Here we've got a stud finder, a cordless drill with a 3/16 inch bit, a couple of socket wrenches. This one has a 1/2 inch socket on it. We have a 1/2 inch wrench, box wrench, and a couple of 15/16 wrenches. You could also get by with a good crescent wrench and maybe a few sockets. So the first thing we want to do is mount the wall brackets to the wall. In order to do that, we need to first find the studs. To do that, you just need any old stud finder. This is an electric one, and this one just has a magnet in it. There are plenty of ways to find studs. Feel free to contact us at support@prxperformance.com if you need help with that. Just put it against the wall where I think there's not a stud, press and hold, and slide toward the stud till it goes off. I'll make a mark there, and then come from the other side and make another mark there, and in between those 2 points is my stud. Now that we've found our stud, we're going to place our first pilot hole. That'll be 19 inches above the floor in the rightmost stud. It's the side I'm going to start on. So on the stud, I measure up 19 inches and place my first pilot hole. Now that the pilot hole is drilled, we're going to go ahead and mount our wall bracket. Starting with the right side, you'll see that this ear will be pointing downward. And as we put this in, we want to make sure that we're not over tightening. It's a lot of extra torque, when you're using a socket wrench, and if you've been working out lately, you'll be able to strip out the wood if you over tighten. So we found all the studs in our wall. We need to find 4 of them to mount this bracket across. We found that they are, in fact, 16 inches spaced apart. And so we're going to go to the 4th one over, and we're going to mount the left side of our wall bracket at 19 inches. If your studs aren't spaced 16 inches on center, then you'll only hit 3 studs, and you'll put a leg screw in the left, middle, and right side. If you have standard 16-inch construction, you will use 4 holes, omitting the middle one, and put leg screws in each of those studs. So I found my stud on the left side of this wall bracket. I'm going to drill my pilot hole again at 19 inches, and then be sure to level the wall bracket when we tighten it later on. And just leave it loose for now. Now that our wall bracket's on the wall, we're going to drill, and it's mostly level. I have a level here. And there's enough play that I can adjust that and make it perfectly level. I'm going to drill my pilot holes on my other studs. Now that we have our lower wall bracket mounted, I'm going to level it up. I'm just going to use the play in the hole to make that perfectly level. Looks like I need to raise the left side a little bit, and then I can tighten it all the way. Again, I'm only tightening it till it's good and snug. I'm going to double check that I'm level. That looks good. And just so that metal meets metal, not so that it pulls on the wood at all. Now that we have our lower wall bracket mounted, we mounted it at 19 inches. Now, if you have some sort of obstruction at 19 inches, we can work around that and we can move that up and down. But since we have it mounted at 19 inches, the most important measurement that we'll do today is the measurement from the center of this bracket, in the center where we drilled that hole, to the center of the top bracket we're about to mount. That measurement needs to match up with the holes on your rack, which are 69 inches apart. So we'll measure from the center of this bracket up 69 inches. We'll make our mark there, and we'll drill a pilot hole right on the stud. So now that we have our measurement for where we're going to put our top bracket, I'm just going to double check it. My little trick for doing that is I drill a pilot hole right where I made that mark. I'm going to put a little screw in there just to make it easier to measure. Now with that small screw in place, I can use it to measure from the top screw to the bottom. And it looks like I have them spaced out about 1/8 of an inch too far. So I'm going to remember to move that down a little bit before I mount that top bracket. Okay, I marked where I want my actual pilot hole to go. I'm going to go ahead and drill that now. And then we will mount the upper wall bracket the same way we did the lower one. We'll start with the right side, line that up with the ears pointing downward, and then we will measure up on the other side and true that up. Again, remember here to not over tighten the bolt. Okay, now that we have everything lined up, we're going to tighten all those top leg screws and move on to assembly. Just make sure we're level here. Just nice and snug. All right, let's move on to assembly. Okay, now that we have our wall brackets mounted, we're going to move on to the easy part, and that is the assembly. The first part of the assembly process is to mount these linkage arms. You should have 4 of these. We call them linkage arms or swing arms. It has this gas spring on it, and the question is, how do we put all these different parts on there in the right order? This piece sometimes can get confusing. We call it a nyliner. It's just a plastic bushing, and the wide side of the bushing is going to go into, the narrow side goes into the linkage arm. The wide side is always going to be between and touching the painted parts. So that never touches these flat washers. So the narrow side goes in the linkage arm, and then that will be set up. So a washer will go on this bolt. Washer, so bolt goes washer, then wall mount, then nyliner, because it's touching a painted part, and then this, slide on, flat washer, and this locking nut, the plastic side of the locking nut, will be on the outside, so that goes on second. It goes on toward the outside of the nut. It should go on easy at first and then get tough. And this is a 15/16 bolt. So you can use a crescent wrench, whatever you have. I have here a 15/16 box wrench and a socket with an impact, a socket wrench with the impact socket. Just turn that into place. Now, this does not need to be tight. Again, just, this is a locking nut, and so once we get it snug, we can stop. This should move freely and just without too much play. So if it has a little too much play in it, I always tighten it up a little more. Just don't over tighten to the point that it's difficult to move it. It should be able to swing free. There you go. Okay, so we're going to repeat that process for each of the 4 linkage arms, attaching them to the wall brackets using this shortest bolt. It's the 1 3/4 inch bolt. First the bolt, onto the flat washer, through the wall bracket, wide side of the nyliner, linkage arm, flat washer, and a locking nut. done is we've set up our rack so that the top is away from the wall, and we've got our kipping bar here. You can see that there's the second bar down here. Now, the end of the bracket without a bar on it is going to be at the top of the rack. So the hole here is the one where we are going to use our longest bolts, in this case 4-inch bolt. That will go through this part of the bracket without a bar, and that will go through the top of the rack. It's nice to have a buddy to do this part with. We're going to start by, this bolt just acts as a placeholder. So I'm going to start by putting one washer on it, and then just put that bolt through and allow it to rest there. I want to put one nut on it as well, just so it doesn't fall away. But this bolt does not need to be tight, because we're going to take it out in a little bit, because you'll see in a little bit that this bolt actually also holds that top linkage arm. We'll do the same on the other side. Just put that placeholder bolt, the long one, through the top hole of the upright, through that loose end of this bracket on the kipping bar, and that's just a placeholder for this. Now, the next step, we'll take that shorter bolt. This one is not a placeholder. This one is going to stay in place. We'll take two of these shorter bolts, 2 nuts and flat washers, and this little move right here. I'm going to lift the kipping bar. It's nice to have a buddy at this point. I'm going to have Eric come join us. And he'll just line up those holes so that we can, again, this is the shorter bolt. And that can be tightened up all the way if you like. Same on the other side. Bolt, flat washer, through that hole that lines up. It's the hole, I believe it's about 14 inches from the top of your rack. Now, this kipping bar can be lowered. If you want to do that, you're going to need a couple of extra of these 3.5-inch bolts. And of course, you can contact us for help with that. Okay, at this point, we are ready to attach the rack to the wall brackets, attach it all to the linkage arms. At this point, I do recommend you have a buddy give you some help just for safety purposes. So we'll move on to that now. We'll have Eric help us out, and we'll be up and running in no time. Top first. Remembering to put in the nyliner so that the painted parts both touch the wide side of the nyliner. The narrow side will be in the linkage arm with this bolt with the flat washer back on. Through the kipping bar. And another flat washer and that locking nut. So we can tighten up the bottom of the kipping bar. Probably should have done that already. And then for these top linkage arm bolts, again, just make them snug. They don't have to be tight, just tight enough to get the play out so it doesn't wobble, but loose enough so that it pivots freely. Bottom linkage arm works the same as the top. We'll slip that nyliner in so that it's wide side toward the inside. The bolt with a flat washer. Make sure that flat washer's on the outside. Another washer. And the nut. Just until it's snug. All right, we've made it to our last linkage arm. Again, the nyliner slips in, so the wide side is between. Take that shorter bolt, 3.5 inch bolt through there. Now, if you notice that your rack is folding up more difficult than you'd like it to, it doesn't look as easy as we make it look, well then you might want to consider loosening up these bolts a little bit. The nut isn't going anywhere, it's a locking nut, so feel free to tinker around with that a little bit just to see if it makes a difference as you fold it. So, speaking of folding, our next step is to fold the rack up without gas shock assist so that we can connect the gas shocks. Okay, now that we have the rack set up, we're gonna go ahead and attach the gas springs. If you have a buddy, we got Eric here. He's gonna help me lift it and then hold it for me. If you don't have a buddy, once you get it lifted, be sure to put a safety pin through so that it doesn't come crashing down on you. Now, the gas spring should have a 1/2 inch nut already attached to the ball joint bolt. And so we unscrew that nut. We'll give you a close-up of this in a second. And that bolt goes through the ear of the wall bracket, and we just tighten it back down. Just take that flange nut off, post through the wall bracket, tighten her down. Nice and snug. Okay, now that we have the gas springs attached, let's see if it works well. Now remember, if it seems a little sticky, you can adjust the tightness of those bolts wherever the linkage arm's attached, whether it's back on the wall bracket or to the upright. And let's see how it folds up. practically jumps off the floor, holds itself up. And that's how you install a PRX profile rack. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or Eric or anybody on Team PRX at support@prxperformance.com, or give us a call at 701-566-0452. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks.